The moment I dropped the folder on that boardroom table, the whole room went still. My sister's voice, caught on a hot mic, echoed, "She's just a parasite with good hair." I'm Odessa, and what my parents did still stings. They drained the business fund I built over 6 years to buy my sister a yacht. No warning, no explanation, just a photo in my inbox like it was a family postcard. But I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I played the long game, and when I walked out, it was on my terms. Before we jump into the story, if you don't mind, let me know where you're from by leaving a comment below. That way, I can send a special hello your way. Now, go ahead, grab yourself a warm cup of water and find a comfy spot. It's time to begin the story. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when I saw it, an email titled New Family Purchase. At first, I assumed it was a marketing blast, something from a boat dealership or one of those lifestyle newsletters I never subscribed to but couldn't seem to unsubscribe from either. But when I opened it, everything in me sank. There it was, a picture of a sleek, white yacht, glinting in the sunlight like something out of a luxury magazine. The subject line became ironic once I saw the note beneath the photo. For Zanaya, to celebrate her recent promotion. Thought you'd love to see it. Mom. I read it again. And again. The blood drained from my face. This couldn't be real. That account, the family business fund, was supposed to be for investments, for our shared ventures, for the startup I'd been pitching to my father for the past 6 years. I had contributed to it consistently, not just financially, but with research, documentation, meeting notes, monthly growth forecasts. I'd saved, I'd planned, I'd played by the rules, and now it was gone, just like that. I sat motionless for a moment, staring at the screen, the edges of my vision blurring slightly. Outside, the sun peeked through the blinds of my apartment, casting stripes across the hardwood floor. It was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the occasional ping of another email hitting my inbox. But nothing else that came through mattered. Not anymore. Growing up, I always knew Zanaya was the favorite. She had that effortless charm that made people lean in. Teachers loved her. Coaches gave her second chances. At family dinners, she was the one asked about her dreams, while I was asked about logistics. What time I'd be home, whether I'd picked up groceries, if I could send an invoice for the website again. Still, I believed, maybe naively, that in the world of business, effort would finally win. That if I worked hard enough, documented enough, stayed humble and smart, I'd earn my seat at the table. But today's message was the equivalent of someone pulling out my chair just as I was about to sit down. I clicked open the attached statement. It was the full transaction. Paid in full. The entire fund, 6 years of savings, disciplined planning, late nights balancing spreadsheets while everyone else watched Netflix, drained, and not even a heads up. I called my mother first. She picked up on the third ring, her voice too cheerful. "Oh, hi, honey. Did you see the yacht? Isn't she beautiful? We're calling her the Zephyr. Your sister thought of the name." "Mom," I said slowly, "did you use the business fund?" There was a pause. Not long, but telling. "Well, sweetie, your father and I thought it was time to reward Zanaya. She's been working so hard, and I've been working hard too," I said, my voice tightening. "Well, of course, dear, but you know how she's always been the one to really chase the spotlight. She needs this exposure. Plus, it's a family asset. You'll benefit too when we have gatherings and events." Events. Right. I hung up and called Dad. He didn't even pretend to be surprised. "It's just a boat, Odessa," he said like I'd lost my mind. "We've all made sacrifices for the family business. This was her time to enjoy the fruits." The fruits? That sentence hit me harder than I expected. To him, this wasn't betrayal. It wasn't even a conversation. It was business as usual. My work, my contributions, my years of planning, they weren't fruits. They were fertilizer, invisible, necessary, expected. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just sat there in the silence of my apartment, the faint buzz of the fridge sounding suddenly so loud. The city outside carried on as usual. Somewhere in Austin, people were walking dogs, sipping overpriced lattes, arguing about parking meters. But in my little corner, something had cracked. I opened my laptop and clicked over to my work email. My cursor hovered over the compose button. Resignation? Is that what I wanted? To just walk away? It would be so easy, so clean. But clean didn't mean just. And something in me, something tired, something sharp, knew this wasn't the time to bow out. I needed to understand what just happened. I needed to dig deeper. How long had this favoritism been allowed to fester? Who else had been complicit? Who had seen me as expendable while smiling to my face? I closed the laptop. This wasn't just about a boat. This was about my worth. And I wasn't going to let them write me out of the story they built on my silence. The next morning, I walked into my office and stared at the sticky note I had posted months ago. Stay quiet, stay focused. I peeled it off. Not anymore. Something my grandmother once told me came back to me in that moment. I was 13, crying after Zanaya had humiliated me in front of her friends. My grandmother had simply said, "Some people earn their place by being loud. Others build their place in silence, but both deserve to be seen. I deserve to be seen." I poured myself a second cup of coffee, sat back down, and opened a new folder on my desktop. I titled it in all caps, TRUTH. This time, I wouldn't ask to be included. This time, I'd play the game, and I'd win it. Quietly. I thought I'd feel rage. That was the natural response, right? But the truth was stranger. I felt calm, almost cold, like something inside me had clicked into place, not shattered. Maybe it wasn't anger I needed. Maybe it was clarity. Maybe this was the universe's roundabout way of saying, now's your chance. The next morning, I stepped into Signal Fuse's lobby with a different kind of silence than usual. It wasn't the silence of being small or overlooked. It was the silence of someone watching, calculating, learning the edges of the board before making the first move. Most people didn't see me when I passed by. I wasn't one of the creative team darlings with their standing desks and neon sticky notes. I wasn't running point on a major product launch or dazzling clients over catered lunches. I worked in HR analytics, quiet, back-end, invisible. And yet every decision made in this building left a fingerprint in the data. And fingerprints, well, they can't lie. My cubicle sat at the far end of the second floor, tucked between the copy room and the stairwell, which meant people didn't linger near me unless they had to. That suited me just fine. I didn't want attention, I wanted access. I started keeping a private log, not on company servers. On a clean device I brought from home, names, dates, observations, comments overheard during meetings, how often my code snippets showed up in decks that didn't list me as a contributor. I wasn't collecting for revenge, not yet. I was collecting for understanding. There's a difference. Sometimes, late at night, Reeve would ask if I was okay. He never pushed, never demanded answers, just leaned against the doorframe of my home office, arms folded, a soft look in his eyes. "You've been quieter lately," he said one Thursday evening. "Just work stuff," I replied, not looking up from my screen. "Want to talk about it?" "Not yet." He nodded. "Okay, I'll be on the couch." That's one of the reasons I married him. He never mistook silence for weakness. He just made space for it. At work, Xenia continued her parade, commanding meetings with perfect posture and brighter than necessary slides. She was magnetic. I'll give her that. She knew how to control a room, even when her points were recycled from last quarter, or when she casually name-dropped projects I had been the first to touch. I didn't flinch, not outwardly, but I made note of every discrepancy. I also started looking deeper. The company's internal systems were organized but not airtight. As someone with analytics clearance, I had access to backlogs, audit trails, and version histories. Not because I was nosy, because I was trained to catch inconsistencies in workflows. That was my job. So when I noticed that a series of budget approvals in our marketing spend didn't match up with our previous quarter's reports, and when those inconsistencies connected to vendors tied to a Mere Events LLC, I made note of that too. Was it coincidence? Maybe. But I'd stopped believing in coincidences. Clarissa, my direct supervisor in HR, occasionally hovered near my desk, offering polite nods and the kind of half-smile that suggested she knew more than she said. "You keeping up okay, Odessa?" she asked one morning, sipping coffee from a ceramic mug shaped like a cactus. "Doing fine." "You're doing more than fine. You've got a clean slate, no missed deadlines, consistent metrics. Quiet workers keep this place running." I smiled politely. I wanted to believe she meant that, but I'd seen her in boardroom meetings too, nodding a little too quickly when Zania presented insights I knew had come from my terminal. By fall, I had a folder labeled Contingency, with over 100 pages of screenshots, reports, and Slack captures. I still hadn't decided what I'd do with it. That was the thing about silence. It gave you time to decide what kind of story you wanted to tell when you finally spoke. Then one night, a message appeared in my inbox. Subject, "Thought you should know." From Preston Devine. He worked in UX 3 rows over. We weren't close. Barely more than hallway nods and shared eye rolls when someone burned popcorn in the break room. The email was short, just one line. "I thought you should know. Zania's been taking credit for your work." I stared at it for what felt like forever. Not because it surprised me, but because someone else had seen it. Someone else had decided to say it out loud. I didn't reply, not right away. Instead, I closed my laptop, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of red wine. Then I sat on the couch and opened the secure folder on my personal device. The tabs flickered across the screen like pieces of a puzzle, finally beginning to show a picture. Meeting summaries. Budget mismatches, version timestamps that didn't align, my own code, copied and pasted into decks where my name was nowhere to be found. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't a moment for revenge. Not yet. This was about precision, about waiting until the cracks were wide enough that the truth wouldn't just slip through, it would flood the room. I took another sip of wine and let myself smile. They thought I was the quiet one, but silence, I'd learned, can be louder than anything, if you wait long enough. The moment I realized I had everything I needed came on a quiet Tuesday evening. My inbox pinged, and there it was, Preston's follow-up. A spreadsheet titled Signal Fuse Audit Trail Q1 to Q3. I opened it without hesitation, and in a matter of seconds, I saw it all. Dozens of rows, cleanly time-stamped, mapping my original work directly to Zania's presentations. Slide decks, proposal files, analytic briefs, even small copy edits I'd made on internal memos. It was all there, black and white. I sat back in my chair and let out a slow breath. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. What I felt was something steadier, something quieter and colder. Like a stone at the bottom of a still lake, a kind of calm that only came when denial no longer had room to live. For years, I'd convinced myself that I was just being sensitive, that maybe I wasn't contributing as much as I thought, that my invisibility in the family and at work was my fault. But this was data, proof, and data, unlike people, didn't lie to save face. Later that night, I sat cross-legged on the living room rug, surrounded by open folders, flash drives, and my laptop. The soft hum of the dishwasher buzzed from the kitchen, and the city beyond my windows moved on like nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. I remembered sitting at the kitchen counter as a teenager, asking my mom if she'd read the essay I'd written about starting a non-profit for girls in STEM. "That's nice, honey," she'd said, barely glancing up from her tablet. But when Zania won second place in a debate competition, she got balloons and a family dinner at La Scala. Funny how those moments stay with you, not because they break you, but because they build something different inside you, something sharper. I clicked into the folder I'd labeled Truth and began organizing the spreadsheet from Preston with the rest of my files. Version histories, email trails, Slack snippets, even internal proposal drafts that had mysteriously gone missing, only to reappear in presentations with Zanaya's initials in the metadata. This wasn't just about one slight anymore. It was a pattern, a system. And it was time to dismantle it. I knew I couldn't go public yet, not until I had protections in place. So I started small, adjusting the metadata on my own files to include author tags and hidden timestamps. I ensured my contributions to every current project were recorded in both internal logs and email threads. If they wanted to erase me again, they'd have to trip over the paper trail first. That night I called Reeve. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, you home late?" "Yeah," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. "I've been working on something." He paused. "Something for work?" "Something for me." He didn't ask right away. That's another thing I loved about him. He knew when to wait. "I'm not going to sit around and let her take everything," I said after a beat. "I don't care if she's my sister. I've spent years building myself back up, and I'm not letting her tear it down again." His voice softened. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Odessa." "I know, but I'm going to anyway." Back at Signal Fuse, I became deliberate. I adjusted my daily schedule to cross paths with key people in casual ways. Hallway greetings with team leads, coffee line small talk with the legal assistant, polite compliments to Clarissa about her cactus mug. Every move calculated, every smile chosen. I even started looping Clarissa into more communications, BCCing her on feedback I gave during team meetings or follow-ups after minor wins. Just enough to plant seeds. Just enough for people to start seeing me, and all the while Zinnia kept shining. She presented at the company-wide review with her signature poise, quoting retention metrics I had modeled just 2 weeks earlier. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, but she had no idea the floor beneath her had begun to shift. That Friday, I drafted 3 emails, one to the HR compliance officer, another to the director of data governance, and one anonymous tip through our internal ethics portal. I attached versions of Preston's spreadsheet along with annotated notes connecting source files and presentation decks. I didn't send them yet. Instead, I reviewed everything again, triple-checked my own timeline, then stepped out onto the apartment balcony. The fall breeze rolled in over Austin, brushing my skin with something that almost felt like peace. Then I went back inside, sat down, clicked send. All 3 messages went out within seconds of each other, scattered like breadcrumbs for the right people to follow. Not loud, not flashy, but clear. I closed my laptop and let my hands rest in my lap. A small smile crept across my face. Not smug, not vengeful, just resolved. The game had begun, and Zanaya didn't even know it was her move. I walked into that boardroom carrying nothing but a folder and the truth they all tried to ignore. The badge printer clicked as the receptionist handed me a visitor pass. She didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer answers. I just nodded, walked to the elevator, and pressed the button for the top floor. This wasn't about theatrics. I didn't need fireworks. I had facts. Reeve once told me, "The quietest ones leave the deepest marks." Back then, I thought it was about strength in silence. But I've come to learn silence only serves you when people care enough to hear what's unspoken. Today, I wouldn't be silent. The elevator doors opened to sunlight pouring through the tall windows of the Signal Fuse boardroom floor. Everything looked polished. Glass walls, sleek wood accents, perfectly spaced succulents on the ledges. People were already seated, laptops open, espresso cups on coasters, small talk rippling in low tones. Zanaya stood near the main screen, clicking through a set of slides with the kind of confidence you either build or inherit. For her, it was the latter. She didn't glance up immediately. Maybe she didn't expect me, or maybe she thought I'd flinch like always, but not today. When she finally looked up, her eyes paused on mine for a split second. I saw it, a flicker of surprise. It vanished quickly, replaced by a cool smile and a sideways tilt of her head. a performance. "Miss Lark," said Gerard, the board chair. His tone was polite, practiced. "We weren't expecting—" "I won't take much time," I said. "I'm here as a stakeholder." Reeve gave a subtle nod from the back row. That nod was everything. It gave me presence, legitimacy, voice. I moved to the table, laying down a thick folder of documents. Clarissa, head of HR, blinked. Janice straightened in her seat. Zanaya's jaw tightened ever so slightly. I opened the folder, pulled out color-coded slide decks, printed Slack threads, time-stamped version histories. I handed them down the line. "Everything in these documents was created by me," I said. "Every graph, every analysis, every insight. What's disturbing is how they were presented to you, under someone else's name." The projector flicked on. I showed two nearly identical presentations, my original file and the final version Zanaya submitted. Names were changed, notes stripped, but the core work, mine. Even the embedded formulas matched. I had the timestamps to prove it. Clarissa frowned. A few board members shifted, murmuring to one another. "Here's the audit log from the internal system," I continued. "This shows the login session of Lauren, Miss Mary's assistant, accessing my draft folder without permission." I clicked again. The screen displayed grainy security footage, Lauren typing into a terminal, my name visible on the login credentials. A separate window showed my calendar, proving I was in another building at the time. Then I played the audio. It came from a hot mic moment captured during a previous town hall. "She's a parasite with good hair. I don't care if she crashes. It'll make her leave faster." Zanaya's voice, casual and sharp. The room went still. Even the HVAC hum seemed to hold its breath. The walk across the floor to the boardroom had felt longer than usual, each step echoing against the marble. I could almost hear every version of myself, the quiet intern, the invisible analyst, the underestimated sister, trailing behind me like shadows that no longer belonged. As I stood by the screen, I let my eyes meet each board member's in turn. Most looked curious. A few looked uncomfortable. One or two tried not to look at me at all. I understood. Truth has a way of disrupting neat agendas and coffee-fueled pleasantries. "This isn't a personal attack," I said, my voice even. "This is documentation. It's proof of systemic erasure, of voices, of effort, of people who don't play the politics but do the work." Behind me, the projector fan hummed softly. It was the only sound until I clicked to the next slide. There it was, Slack threads where I had offered suggestions later parroted in meetings, email trails where I had been left off, final chains. Project drafts, lifted and altered just enough to appear original. Even the assistants in the room began to look at each other. I watched Zanaya's mask falter ever so slightly. Not panic, not yet, but the kind of stillness that precedes it. And then came the voice recording. When it ended, no one moved. No one reached for a refill. I saw someone near the back close their laptop without a sound. No one expects the quiet one to bring a ledger this precise. Gerard leaned forward. "Miss Mary, do you wish to respond?" Xenia's smile twitched. "This is being taken out of context. She's unauthorized access." Clarissa interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "That's a breach of policy." "She's doing this to embarrass me," Zanaya snapped, her composure slipping. "No," I replied. "I'm doing this to end it." Gerard turned to Clarissa. "Is the documentation valid?" She nodded. "We'll conduct a full review, but from what I've seen, yes." The board chair adjusted his glasses. "Miss Mary, effective immediately, you are suspended pending an internal ethics investigation." Zania stood up sharply. "You're siding with her. After everything I've done for this company?" No one answered. I reached into my folder and pulled out a sealed envelope. I walked to the head of the table and laid it down in front of Gerard. "This is my resignation," I said, "effective immediately." Clarissa inhaled, then seemed to think better of whatever she was about to say. I'm not walking away in shame, I continued. I'm walking away because I won't keep begging for the space I already earned. I looked at Reeve. He looked back, not proud, not surprised, just steady. That was enough. Then I left. No tears, no second glance. I remembered something my grandmother once told me as a girl, sitting on her porch. They'll talk over you if you let them, baby, so don't ask to speak. Just wait until you have something they can't ignore. That moment had come. In that moment, I realized something. Power doesn't always come from being loud. Sometimes it comes from knowing when your silence becomes their discomfort. And this time, they would sit in it. The elevator ride down felt quieter than ever. Not because I was defeated, because I was done. Not angry, not shaking, just still. As the metal doors closed behind me, I stood with my hands folded, watching the numbers descend. Floor 20, floor 19. I wasn't carrying a box, no keepsakes or picture frames tucked under my arm, just a leather folder and the faintest trace of lavender from the hand lotion Reeve always said reminded him of home. When I first joined Signal Fuse, I used to shrink inside my own blazer. That morning, I left it on my chair, like shedding skin I no longer needed. Outside, Austin was caught between seasons. Fall hadn't fully arrived, but the summer heat had finally loosened its grip. Leaves skittered across the sidewalk, little burnt orange messengers tumbling at my feet. I walked toward my car without looking back. Later that afternoon, I sat on the couch, legs tucked beneath me, staring at the screen of my laptop. The Signal Fuse Slack workspace was still open. Hundreds of unread messages, none of them worth responding to. My mouse hovered for a moment before I clicked, Leave Workspace. A quiet little pop confirmed my departure. No fireworks, no applause, just silence and peace. Then came the mailing lists, daily project digests, the monthly newsletter, the HR memo archive. One by one, I unsubscribed. The final message came with a subject line, "We'll miss you, Odessa." I didn't open it. I just smiled and closed the tab. The following week, I received an email from someone I hadn't spoken to since college, Mira Feldman. She now led a women-owned startup collective in East Austin. The subject line read, "Coffee and Conversation." In the body, she wrote, "We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for someone who knows what it feels like to be silenced and still stands." I blinked, then reread it. We scheduled a Zoom meeting for Thursday afternoon. I wore a soft blue sweater, no makeup, just lip balm and clarity. There were 5 of them on the call. Founders, operations leads, HR consultants, all women, all at different points in their careers. They weren't trying to impress anyone. No jargon, no empty vision statements, just real talk. The kind that makes space instead of stealing it. One of them asked, "What's your ideal work culture?" I paused, then answered honestly, "One where nobody has to prove they belong." There was a silence, the good kind, the kind that listens. By the end of the call, they offered me a role, head of people and ethics across 3 small but growing companies. Not flashy, not public-facing, but meaningful. I didn't hesitate. I said yes, not just to the job, but to a version of myself I'd never allowed to fully exist. The part that wasn't built to impress, just to live and lead with dignity. That evening, Reeve made mushroom risotto and played his favorite Sam Cooke vinyl while I poured 2 glasses of wine. The apartment smelled like thyme and rain. I sat across from him, both of us cross-legged on the floor like we used to do when we first moved in. He didn't ask about the job. He didn't need to. "You ever think about what we leave behind?" I asked, gently swirling the wine in my glass. Reeve looked up. "You mean like a legacy?" "Number? More like all the noise, the chasing, the proving." I paused. "I think I'm done with all that." He reached for my hand. "Then you're finally free." After dinner, we walked through downtown, our hands laced like threads in a worn quilt. The sky had softened to a deep blue, and the air smelled like cedar and cinnamon from the nearby bakery. As we strolled past the glass facade of Signal Fuse, Reeves slowed. The building stood tall and sleek, lit from within like a lantern full of secrets. "You want to go in?" he asked, voice low. I looked at the place where I once sat through meetings, bit my tongue through insults, and waited for applause that never came. And then I smiled, warm and sure. Number, let's keep walking. We did, past the glinting towers, past the cars inching through 6th Street, past everything I used to think I needed to prove my worth. Some exits are loud, full of slamming doors and shouted goodbyes. Mine was quiet, like a deep breath after a long dive. And sometimes, the absence of applause is the clearest sign that you've done exactly what you needed to do. I mailed it on a Tuesday. No name on the return label, no dramatic signature. Just a plain flash drive and a single handwritten note. This could have been shared credit. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. The sky was unusually clear that morning, the kind of spring clarity that made everything feel fresh-washed and honest. I brewed a cup of cinnamon coffee and watched the sun pull long shadows across the porch. Inside my home office, the space I once used for late-night crisis control had been rearranged. Where old project binders used to sit, there were now soft succulents in mismatched pots, a corkboard pinned with affirmations, and a new frame hanging over my desk. Inside, it was a note I'd found the week before, tucked in the sleeve of a dusty birthday card I almost threw out. My grandmother's handwriting, looped and careful as always, read, "Your voice is quiet, Odessa, but it carries." I stared at those words for a long time, like they were a secret I'd only just earned the right to understand. It wasn't about speaking louder. It was about speaking with clarity and care, knowing when to step in and when to step away. And this, today, was a stepping away kind of day. I opened the old red folder on my desktop for the last time. Every piece of documentation, every Slack thread, audit log, and duplicated file was still there, still perfectly organized. But I didn't feel anger when I looked at it now. I felt something quieter, like peace, like a chapter ending. I renamed it Recourse Archive, not for revenge, but for reference. A reminder that I once stood up, even when my voice shook. Reeve came in with his second cup of tea, setting it down beside mine with that gentle familiarity I'd come to rely on. He didn't ask what I was working on. He just looked at me with a kind of quiet understanding. That was his magic. He never needed to be the center of the story to be its steady thread. "You still thinking about sending it?" he asked, tilting his head toward the flash drive I'd already sealed in the envelope. I nodded. "It's not for her. It's for me." He smiled softly. Closure isn't always an answer. Sometimes it's knowing you've said everything you needed to say. The deck I'd sent, clean, precise, collaborative, was the one Zenaya and I could have co-led. If things had been different, if she'd seen me as a partner instead of a pawn, I didn't include the call-outs or the receipts, just the version of the future that could have been, a shared win, an alternate ending. But I knew better now. Some people aren't capable of sharing space. They only know how to conquer it. By mid-afternoon, I was on a Zoom call with one of my new clients, a startup run by 3 women who'd left a major fashion conglomerate to build something more intentional. They wanted help shaping their workplace culture, real systems, not just surface-level perks. One of them, a young woman named Jo, leaned forward in the frame and said, "We don't need someone who's never failed. We need someone who knows what it feels like to be silenced and who found a way to speak anyway." I didn't say anything at first, just smiled, the kind that came from somewhere earned. "I can do that," I said. That evening, after we made dinner together, Reeve grilled vegetables and I tossed a warm farro salad with lemon and herbs, we stepped out for a walk. The pecan trees lining our street were starting to leaf out again, casting soft shadows on the pavement. Austin in spring was always my favorite, before the heat settled in, before the air felt too heavy. As we walked past the glass facade of Signal Fuse, Reeve slowed down a little, his hand brushing mine. "You want to stop in?" he asked, not unkindly. I didn't hesitate. "No," I said. "Let's keep walking." He nodded and we did. No fanfare, no applause. Just the sound of our steps on the sidewalk and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you no longer need anyone else's permission to feel whole. Back home, I lit a small candle on my desk and looked around at the life I'd built, one rooted not in proving, but in becoming. I'd never be the loudest voice in the room, but I had finally learned to speak in ways that couldn't be ignored, and maybe that was enough. The next morning, my phone buzzed with an email from one of the startup leads. Subject: Speaking Opportunity. Body: We're hosting an all-hands in 2 weeks. The team would love to hear your story. Raw, honest, no polish needed. Are you in? I stared at the blinking cursor in the reply field, then typed, "Tell them I'll be there, and this time I'm bringing my own mic." I hit send, closed the lid of my laptop, and stood by the window, coffee in hand, as the sun spilled over the street. No applause, just breathe, just room. And finally, peace. Sometimes, closure doesn't come with applause. It comes with peace. I didn't get the apology I once craved, but I found something better: the freedom to speak in my own voice on my own terms. In life, it's easy to stay quiet when we're overlooked. But our worth isn't measured by recognition. It's revealed when we choose integrity over bitterness. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away with grace. If this story touched a part of your own journey, I'd be honored to hear what it meant to you. Feel free to share your thoughts, and if you'd like to join me for future reflections, I'll be right here.